Okay, good morning and welcome again. Today we're going to have a virtual tour of the Mishkan Museum of Art, and we are so lucky to have Tanya Fredman here to be our hostess, and live from Israel. She's been working as an educator and a guide at the museum since 2017, but she's originally from St. Louis. She studied fine arts at Brandeis University before moving to Israel in 2011. And as part of the museum's team of educators, she creates meaningful encounters with art for children and people of all ages. So we're in for a real treat. I will turn things over to Tanya and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Laura. And it's great to see all of you. Great to have you with us. I'm here in Israel, in Kibbutz Shluchot, which is in the northern part of the country. And I moved here to Israel 11 years ago, originally, as Laura said, from St. Louis, Missouri, very proud St. Louisian. And I work at the Mishkan Museum of Art, which I'm very, very excited to get to share with you. It's a very special art center in Israel, really one of the leading art institutions in the country. And we have a particularly groundbreaking exhibition to share with you today. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll jump in. As Laura said, feel free to ask questions in the chat or raise your hand. And we're really excited. I'd love for this to be interactive. I'll make sure to also leave time for questions at the end of the session as well. Okay. So you can see here the entranceway to the Mishkan Museum of Art in Ein Harod. Just to give you some context, I'll show you here on this map where it's located. We're in the northern part of Israel, about halfway between Tel Aviv and Haifa, in what's really referred to as the northern periphery. And so it's not by any understanding the center of the art world, though as you'll see, it is kind of its own cultural center, providing a large range of art and cultural opportunities to the local community and very much beyond as well. And the makeup of that local community is really an important part of the role that the Mishkan plays, which we'll get a little bit more into as we go. So we're going to enter the museum, and here we're standing in the front hall of the museum. And one thing you'll notice as we tour around is the really interesting architecture of the space. You can notice the rounded ceilings, the lighting that's coming in from spaces above the ceiling. All of that lighting is based on natural light. And so this museum was actually the first art museum that was constructed specifically for the purpose of being an art museum in Israel. The building was built in 1948 by the architect Samuel Bickles. And he based all of the architecture completely on natural light, with the idea that the best way to see the artwork is in the natural light. And so we'll see as we tour around that different spaces in the museum have different shape ceilings, different shape windows in order to illuminate the artwork in the best way without casting shadows at any time of day on the artwork. And the hall that we are in right now houses the permanent collection exhibition. So before we get into the specific exhibition that we're going to focus on today, which is the Abu Shakra family exhibition, Spirit of Man, Spirit of Place, I just want to give you a sense of the Mishkan's collection so you can understand the perspective that it's coming from. It'll give you some context for understanding the Abu Shakra exhibition. And so you can see here a selection of art from the Mishkan's collection. The Mishkan has a collection of about 20,000 works of art, many of them from great Jewish artists from Europe, many of them from the Paris School of Art, really artists that both capture the stories of Jewish communities all over the world, and artists that are not specifically painting or sculpting Jewish concepts, but happen to be Jewish, alongside Israeli artists of every religion and background. There's a particular interest in the museum's collection on the kibbutz and kibbutz life, because this museum was, of course, established in a kibbutz. So you can see here a painting by the artist Uri Reisman, a color-filled painting, a bit of abstraction here, but highlighting the milking of the cow kind of everyday action that took place on kibbutz, but with a red cow. So a red cow, for some of you, may kind of bring up associations, para aduma, the biblical red cow, that's a symbol of holiness, of spirituality. And the artist is perhaps saying here that here in Israel and on the kibbutz, the place of the highest level of holy work is right here in the cowshed. And so artists who lived on kibbutz really dealt with these themes of what is the role that art plays in a society that's trying to create itself, reconstruct itself, and places a very strong emphasis on the importance of work and the contribution of every member to society. And a very big important player here for the Mishkan is Chaim Attar. So here we see his portrait painted by the artist Moshe Makadi. Chaim Attar was one of the founders of the kibbutz. Kibbutz in Harod was actually the first large kibbutz to be established in Israel. It just celebrated its 100th anniversary. And Chaim Attar came from the Ukraine to Ein Harod, a young man and a painter. And unusually, the kibbutz members actually gave him the permission to be a painter. He didn't have to work in the fields and work in the cowsheds. They saw art as a value in itself. So we can visit here his original shack that served as his studio. This is where he painted, and he primarily painted the children and individuals of the kibbutz. It's really interested in getting into their stories. So it was Chaim Attar, and here you can see his photo, is Chaim Attar, who came before a kibbutz meeting. And I now live in a kibbutz, so I know what it's like to have a kibbutz meeting, and though things are quite different now than they were then, but where you try to reach decisions together that will affect the community by vote. And so Chaim Attar came before the kibbutz members in the late 1920s and said to them, we should have an art museum here. And this was a crazy idea. I mean, this was crazy. Their security situation was terrible. They hardly had enough food to eat. They lived in tents. And he's saying, we need an art museum. And these were the people that came from a world of culture. They left everything behind, but they came from a world where they saw sculptures, where they had beautiful paintings that reminded them of the world that they had come from in Europe. They came from a world of Judaica objects, like this Polish menorah from the 18th century. And for Chaim Attar, it was so important not to lose that memory, to have a place for individuals, even though a kibbutz really focuses on the communal well-being, to have a place for individuals to thrive, to meditate, to connect with their past, and therefore be able to also envision their future. And so they voted. It's written in the archives of the kibbutz that no one opposed his idea, which is unbelievable. And so here's a photo here of the first exhibition in his little shack in 1937. It's a combination of Chaim Attar's portraits and reproductions of Van Gogh. And he then brought in Samuel Bickles, you can see here, to design the actual physical space of the museum. He began to collect artwork, Chaim Attar, going to kibbutz members. Anything they had, a menorah, candlesticks, they gave to the museum. He also went to markets to collect. He wanted things, not only objects, not only representing the communities of the kibbutz, but Jewish communities from all over the world. And the kibbutz then raised funds to send him to Paris twice to bring over great artwork. This was all before World War II. After World War II, he saw it, and the kibbutz members saw it as an imperative to preserve Jewish artwork, Judaica from communities that had been destroyed. And so that added an additional element to their collection. We can see here just a tiny taste into the archives where we keep those 20,000 works, since most of them don't fit into the museum space itself, and just a little peek into the past. So just look at this here for a moment. Okay, are you able to hear that? No, okay. Hold on. So they're not saying anything, so I'll just tell you here, we're entering into those archives. You can see where the artwork is stored, cataloged, from really Jewish communities all over the world, and a combination then over the years of both older artwork and contemporary artwork. Here you can see a portrait of a child by Chaim Attar. These are now you've seen the secret archives, because this is a place that not many people venture into. So I'm going to stop there, and we're going to go back. So I wanted to share this with you just to give you a sense of where the museum is kind of coming from. And the museum has rotating exhibitions several times a year. We have a Judaica wing, sometimes we're showcasing Jewish art and contemporary Jewish art, Israeli art of all different stripes and styles, really ranging over the years. And this past November, we opened up an exhibition, which was really quite remarkable. And has been extended. It was supposed to already come down, but it's been extended until August because of its success. And this is an exhibition of the Abu Shakra family. Now, the Abu Shakra family, and I'll show you who we're talking about here. Just a moment. Okay. The Abu Shakra family is a family of 5, there are actually more that are coming up, but 5 central artists. So to have one family, first of all, of so many artists is not unheard of, but in itself is a remarkable thing. And this is a family of Arab Israeli artists from Al-Fahim. This also is quite a remarkable thing, to have so many really successful, prominent artists coming from the Al-Fahim community. And we're going to look through their exhibition. Now, in some ways, it's 5 solo exhibitions. They're all really unique artists in their own right, but there are also common threads that connect them. And this exhibition is curated by 2 curators, Dalia Bar-Or, who was a longtime director of the Mishkan Museum and is a curator, researcher, professor, and Dr. Husni Al-Khatib-Shehada, who is a researcher of Palestinian art and a professor as well. And they really created this work as a collaborative effort. We have another St. Louis connection here, which I'll mention. This exhibition was in part sponsored, you can see here, by the Steinberg Family Foundation of St. Louis. So we have that connection, we can thank them as well. And I'll share with you here, just to kind of understand the significance that this exhibition plays, to have an exhibition of Palestinian, Arab, Israeli artists in kibbutz in Harod, a place, as you've seen now, that's really founded on the preservation of art, of the Jewish legacy. Zionism is really a statement about the importance of creating a platform for all Israeli voices. And we had the pleasure of having President Herzog share some thoughts with us at the opening of the exhibition. So I'll share with you a little bit of his statements here. You can't hear. Hold on. Okay, well, you can see I think you can see the transcript, but I am going to just then stop my share screen for a second and make sure that you can hear my videos. Let's try again.
מכובדיי כולם, כבוד ותענוג
Can we
גדול
hear okay now?
לשלוח לכם ברכות חמות לרגל החגיגה הזו, ערב פתיחת התערוכות של 5 בני משפחת אבו שקרה, וליד, סעיד, עאסם, פריד וקרים. כנאמר, רוח האדם, רוח המקום. זהו השם הנפלא שהעניקו האוצרות לפרויקט כולו, ונדמה לי שהוא מחזיק תמצית מרוכזת מאוד של הכוח המניע של האומנות שיוצר כל אחד מאומני משפחת אבו שקרה. אומנות שנובעת מרוח ומסורת סופית עמוקה, מאמונה עמוקה בטוב האדם, בקשר עמוק לטבע ולסביבה. למיכל ולי קשר רב שנים עם משפחת אבו שקרה, ואנו מעריכים ומכבדים מאוד את תרומתכם לעולם האומנות וההבעה האומנותית. ומרגש לראות את החיבור בין יצירתיות ואסתטיקה נפלאה ועומקי המשמעות של היצירות, ובינם לבין האכסניה שאנחנו מאוד אוהבים. מוזיאון שמיכל ואני מאוד מאוד אוהבים, מוזיאון עין חרוד, ומעריכים את הקיבוץ הייחודי שבו הוא נמצא. כי גם כשהכל רק התחיל ולא היה...
I'm going to stop you here, but hopefully you're able to see that. And I'm going to stop my share for a second so we can, okay. Were you able to see that and you're able to hear? Yeah, okay, great. Okay, we're going to share screen again and hope that no one disappears. Sorry, just a minute. Okay. I'm not able to see everyone, so I'm just going to ask Laura if anyone's raising their hand or there's a message that you want to send me, if you can just type it into the chat and I'll see it there. Okay, is that all right? Okay, great. All right, so we're going to dive right in now to the exhibition itself because, okay, that is why we're here. Okay, so we're going to begin with Walid. Walid Abu Shakra, the first of the family to take everyone in this direction of art. But the truth is, every one of the artists would say, now Walid is not alive, he died in 2019. There are 3 of the artists who are, Farid, Said, and Karim. They would all say, okay, you can't start with Walid without speaking about the mother. Their mother, Miriam lived a very difficult life, and she really gave the strength to the family. So as we're kind of looking at some of Walid's works here, we have to really start with the story of Miriam. When she was only 5, her mother died in childbirth. And when she was 10, she was actually married off. Her father remarried, and the stepmother really didn't get along with Miriam. And so when she was only 10, they married her off kind of to get her out of the house. And she spoke about in a video that's part of this exhibition, what that experience was like for her. Even though she lived a very difficult life, she believed very strongly that everyone has good inside of them and that everyone can listen to their own heart and find their own path. So her son, her oldest Walid, was born in 1946 in Al-Jun, which is today Megiddo. In 1948, of course, the family then moved. They left to Olive Orchard near Al-Faham and then settled later in Al-Faham. And she encouraged Walid to follow his heart and to paint. And so we can see here the paintings that he began to create. Even though his father later left and he needed to support the family, she sent him to go study art, and he studied in Tel Aviv, and he began to create these still lives. And you can see in the still life here how he's starting to break apart the objects. Here you see a camera and a ladder and a lamp, but he's starting to break it apart into these geometric shapes. And that then becomes his very unique language of geometric abstraction, but filled with the colors and the motifs of his culture. His mother, and also his grandmother, who was a very central character in his life, his grandmother Belkis, were of Sufi heritage. And Sufi is sometimes compared in some way to Jewish Kabbalah, a stream, a sect of Islamic mysticism. And in Sufism, there's a lot of emphasis on the heart, on softening your heart, on softening your own heart, so then you will be able to reach others. And the color that represents the heart is green. So you see that prominent color. The red symbolizes intellect. There's a lot of meaning to all of the colors that he uses. And you can see here in some of his sketches how he's drawing from things in life. You can see there's a tree here and maybe a bridge and some stairs. But then in the paintings, they become these kind of abstracted surfaces of color and shape. Now, this becomes his path, and he shares with his younger siblings and cousins, and they all grew up together. So when he returns home from studying art, he brings his brothers and siblings pencils and erasers, and he teaches them how to draw and gives over this excitement that he has for artwork. He later goes to London, and in London, he encounters this technique of printmaking. This is done by an aquatint technique, which is a kind of complex technique using different kinds of chemicals to create this sort of watercolor-like effect on the surface of the paper. It's a print. And we'll look at some other techniques that he uses. But for Walid, he's really interested in the landscape and how it is spiritual. It represents God for him. He's a very spiritual person, and he feels that he can evoke spirituality in the landscape. So he explores that, and you can see here a picture of Walid working in the print shop. Here he is, you can see him scraping the ink off of the metal plate, and then here's the press that he uses to create the image on the paper. So he really becomes very deeply involved in printmaking. And he does these beautiful etchings of the olive trees. Now, remember, he grew up in the olive tree orchard in Fachem. And so this is the world that he loves. And he now lives in London where he's studying printmaking, but he comes back to visit his family, and he comes back to Fachem, and he has the landscape is so connected emotionally to who he is. And you can see a lot there in these etchings. There's also a lot of sadness, I think you can see in the cut olive trees and the withering olive trees. And he sees his landscape that he grew up with. He can see it changing. And in a lot of ways, it's very heartbreaking for him. And at a certain point, he actually leaves art making altogether and just goes into kind of a spiritual realm, and it becomes very focused just on spirituality, on religion. And it's not until his mother, Miriam, is dying that she says to him, Walid, your art is a gift for you, for all of us. It's a gift from God. Go back to doing it. And he listens to his mother, goes back to creating art, and he makes this series of etchings, which are really almost whitewashed, I think, with light. These are the final series that he does. So he leaves a really strong impression on the rest of the family. And he kind of carries them with him. And each one then goes in their own direction then of pursuing artwork. So I'm going to take you now into another area of the museum, and we'll visit the artwork of Assam Abu Shakra. I'll also just call to your attention again, the shapes of the ceilings, the upper windows. Sometimes the ceiling reminds us of kind of a folded paper or a tent, but the windows are all in the upper spaces here, and the holes that you see connecting it are water drainage pipes, so that the water doesn't sit on the lowered ceiling. And so again, all of that is to allow the space to be illuminated without needing electric light. So I have to say, somehow when I made a change here for the video, I lost all of your faces, and so it's almost like I don't know that you're there. So I'm going to stop my share again just for a second so I can make sure everybody's with me, and then we're going to keep going. Ah, everyone's with me. Great. Okay. We're going to share again, and maybe I can do it so that I can still get it. Try. Yes. Okay. Much better. All right. Very good. Okay. So we're in the room of Asim Abu Shaka. Now, Asim, he created for a very short amount of time because he died at a very young age. He died of cancer at a very young age. He was only 29. And so his works are very hard to come by. After he died, his family sold most of his work. So what we have on display here is both his early sketches, which is an interesting way to get a sense, a kind of a glimpse into what he was exploring as a young artist. It was in the early 1980s that he was studying art, and he, like Walid, went to Tel Aviv to study art. He studied at the Kalisher School, and the Kalisher School is really well known for focusing on learning through sketchbooks. All of the learning is done through drawing, through looking at different great artists, copying the great artists, sketch after sketch after sketch after sketch. And so we have here his early sketchbooks, and you can kind of see what he's exploring. There are a lot of images of planes. That is a theme that repeats very often in his work. He has said to talk about the connection between a plane being something that he was mesmerized by as a young child, something that was just magical, fantastical, but then at the same time, as he got older, something that was also terrifying when you would hear the roar of fighter jets overhead. And so kind of exploring that, and that kind of leads us to his exploration of multiple identities, which you'll see here. He's also very well known for paintings of the sabra, the cactus, the sabra plant, and painting it in a pot, often on a windowsill. And the sabra plant is something that grows freely. It's usually grown as kind of the borders between villages, kind of marks the boundaries. It's not something, of course, that you would normally see in a pot, though today you do more. And so his putting the sabra plant in a pot is, in a way, a kind of reflection on his own identity. He also very often paints these borders around his paintings, a black border, which is said to then show a kind of mirror. It creates a frame, which is both a mirror to himself and also a window out to the world. So he's exploring, it's kind of like a self-portrait. What is his experience? Where does he belong? He came to Tel Aviv to study. He's from Faham. He doesn't really speak Hebrew. He speaks Arabic. What will they think about him in the 1980s in Israel? Will they accept him? Will they not accept him? So he's juggling these kind of multiple identities. And the sabra is one way that he's able to express himself. And I'll add, and we'll speak about it a little bit later, because I'm in the education department at the museum. We've had the opportunity, because of this exhibit, really, to work with many Arab and Jewish students. The region that the museum is located in is quite unique, as being almost half Arab and Jewish communities. And so it's a really important emphasis in the region to have opportunities for meeting together. And the sabra is something that everyone relates to. It symbolizes everyone. The Jewish kids say, "Oh yeah, that's something that's mine." The Arab kids say, "That's something that's mine." So it is really interesting to see that that kind of common ground that comes from this plant. You can see here the sunflowers. So he did spend a lot of time copying different artists, and Van Gogh is one of them. So you can see some reference to Van Gogh, but in a certainly darker sense. And written in Arabic here is aswad, meaning black. A lot of his paintings were painted during a time that he was very sick. And so that you do see that reflected in a lot of his artwork. Here you can see again a kind of reference to a plane. And this is I think the last work of his that's in the exhibition is painted, I think, in the year that he passed away. And something changes here, I think, in the colors, in even in the brush strokes. There's something kind of glowing in the way that the Sabra is almost looking out on the horizon. And so maybe something in his kind of mood and temperament that's already kind of shifting here. So he was really seen as a rising star in Kalisher, in the school. He was really seen as he was going to be great. He was already great. He was going to be incredibly great. And so it really was crushing that he died at such a young age. And when he died, he left behind Karim Abu Shakra. Karim was his nephew, who was 8 when he died. And Karim really looked up to Assam and kind of wanted to be like him. Karim is the youngest of the family participating in the exhibition now. He was born in the early 1980s, I believe. Yeah, in the early 1980s. And he is a very active, prolific painter, frequent visitor to the exhibition. He's, I believe, the only one who really completely pursues only art. He doesn't teach. He's really working in his studio full time. And he was looking for his voice. The catalog of Assam Abu Shakra, his uncle, sat in his studio for many years. And he was trying to figure out, well, how is he different? What does he want his voice to be? And this was the first self-portrait that he painted that's in this exhibition. In it, he bears quite a resemblance to Assam, his uncle. And you can note here, of course, that he hardly has any features. Everything is very vague. And from here, he really developed this language of self-portraiture, expressive, emotional self-portraiture, where each one, certainly there's some reference here to other artists. There's a bit of Modigliani and there's a bit of Van Gogh. And each one expresses a different state of mind. So he really speaks about them as emotional portraits. And this became a language that he continues to still use really constantly. He looks very much like this also. If you see him, he really has like a yellowish kind of yellowish beard. And there's certain motifs that repeat themselves in his artwork. One of them is the bird. You can see quite a lot of birds that come up. And he speaks about the bird as something that's, it's pure, it's sort of objective, and it's watching him. And it accompanies many of his portraits as a way of kind of watching, maybe judging, in some ways, maybe a conscience that's looking over his shoulder. And here you can see that he also incorporates the cactus into his face. So very much the way that Assam did, that Sabar, the cactus, is part of his sense of self. He's very connected to nature as well. You can see here, sometimes he paints himself as a plant, and he speaks about before he will go into the studio, he'll go out into nature and he'll pick up plants and he'll smell them, and it'll give him a kind of inspiration for what he's about to paint. Here he actually has himself in a pot. This is a really striking portrait with the birds on either side in a way really like a conscience, maybe like the good angel and the bad angel that sit on either side of you and kind of whisper to you and tell you what to do. So he has 2 bodies of work in the exhibition. So one is the self-portraits. The next one is a kind of fiercer, fantastical body of work, which combine, again, a lot of different motifs. We have the cactus that repeats itself. We have birds that come into it again, but there's also these monster type characters. And in this body of work, Karim says that he's exploring not only his internal sense, but he's exploring the nature and maybe the emotional nature of his society. He's looking at Fahim, he's looking at Arab society, and he's saying, what's happening there? Where are we struggling? And he's looking at a lot of the obviously you see it now in the news, a lot of the violence that's happening in Arab society today. And the birds here are, again, this kind of objective, maybe conscience that's reminding reminding society of who it's responsible to, a kind of outward onlooker that's giving a reminder to be responsible to something greater. So he's not afraid here to offer critique to the society that he's a part of. We can see here this kind of childlike character, and that comes straight from a drawing of his daughter. His daughter, I believe her name is Noor, hung up a drawing in his studio, and he is a self-taught artist. He really didn't study, and he's the only one who didn't study in any kind of official art context, and he pulls from everything. So even from his daughter's artwork. That's Karim Abu Shaka. And we'll then move into Said. You can kind of see here nicely, first of all, you've got the architecture of this space, so these two ceilings, and also the colors that the curators chose. They really gave each artist a different colored wall as a way to both mentally kind of differentiate between the artists, but also to give a different association to each one. So Said is the founder, and then together with his brother, the director of the Al-Faham Art Gallery. And Said was the younger brother to Walid. Remember, we started with Walid. So Said is his younger brother. And Said then, when Walid left to go study, Said needed to support the family. How did he support the family? He started working with the police to be a officer with youth at risk. And so from a young age, it was very clear to him that he wanted to be involved in social issues. And he saw art as a tool for being involved with social issues and with young people. And so he then established the art gallery of Al-Faham. Again, something very controversial, to have an art gallery that would show contemporary art, that would show non-Arab artists in Al-Faham and give a primary place for art, was something that really stood out, and he saw it as something that would serve the community. So he hasn't created as much artwork in the last years because he's so involved in running the gallery. And it's a gallery that over the years has had a lot of collaborations with the Mishkan Museum. So a lot of the artwork in this exhibition is fairly new. This is 2021, there's a lot from 2022, and you'll see a lot of hyenas in his work. Other animals also, some horses, but really the hyena repeats itself. A lot of ink and charcoal and kind of wild marks, very different than if you think of his brother Walid and very exact, meticulous olive trees. This is seems like a complete opposite. And he speaks about these hyenas, Said, and he says that when he was a child in Al-Faham, his father would send him to deliver things, to go out in the evenings to run errands, and he would hear the howl of the hyena. And it haunted him. Even until this day, he said he can hear that sound of the hyena in his ear, and he never saw one, but it's something that scared him. And so he really wanted to kind of pursue that in his artwork. You could see here, he spent a lot of time in Akko, and you can see here view through the binoculars of Akko at night, again with this kind of darkness and this kind of eerie quality. So he has this, in a way, kind of obsession with the hyenas. And I'll see, I'll show you some more over here. Now, side by side with the drawings of hyenas, he also has drawings of these women. And at first, actually, the curators wanted to separate them into different halls. They said, we'll have an animal hall and we'll have the women hall. And then Said said, no, they need to be together. And it's really interesting, I think, to see them together. First of all, the women are in these very relaxed positions. This is actually his mother, Miriam. He has his grandmother painted here also. And I think that when he places the hyenas together with the women who gave him such confidence and such hope and such stability, it changes the perspective a little bit. Now, I'm so sorry, I don't have a zoom in picture of the hyena on the right, but there's actually a hyena that's nursing her pups. And this hyena is a mother. And I think that really changes the view here, because then Said is able to relate to these kind of vicious creatures as protecting their families. And that, of course, is what his mother was doing all along. And it then allowed him to relate to these dark creatures, but in a way that he could almost understand and that didn't seem so scary anymore. Now, for Said, the centrality of his mother, for all of them, but for Said especially, is so prominent. He created a film, and this is another space in the museum where the film is on display. So you can see here kind of a living room setup, and this is his mother, Miriam. When his mother was close to dying, Said brought her to his home, and for weeks and weeks, she just received everyone in the family and blessed them. And he had the whole thing, just had a recorder going and just videoed the whole thing. She speaks about her life. She speaks about what it was like being married at 10 and how they tried to make her look older and how she didn't know what was going on. And she speaks about that. And you see her braiding her hair and blessing everyone. And for Said, this needed to be a focus of the exhibition, to give that honor to his mother, who gave him strength to deal with even things that today instill in him fear. Now we're moving away from Said. We have one more really beautiful painting by Asim. This is a piece that was hanging in the center of the school, Kalisher School, where Asim studied for many years until the school closed. And so it's kind of an iconic piece, again, with an airplane, and it has some three-dimensional elements to it. Again, combining like the beauty of the airplane with a little bit of the fear that it instilled in him. And at the opposite end here of this space, we then have Farid. Farid is the third brother. So he's the younger brother. We have Walid, Said, and Farid. He's the younger brother. He's a professor in colleges. He works with a big group of apprentices. Actually, some of the guides, the Arabic speaking guides at the museum are his apprentices. He works in a number of different studios and with many different materials. So he's a little bit different than some of the other artists in that really the range of materials that he works in. And he will say that, and we spoke a little bit about how Asim had these multiple identities that he kind of juggled. So Farid will say it's not just Israeli and Arab or Palestinian. He has 20 identities that he's juggling, and he wants to give them all a space in his work. So he has sculpture and painting and embroidery and collage and video, and really a very broad range of different types of work. So we'll look at a few closer. He has a series of works incorporating embroidery, and he'll say that the kind of feminine technique of embroidery is something that is very important to him. It's important culturally, and he wanted to incorporate it. And he'll combine the embroidery with tiny, 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 tiny holes that he creates with needles. So here it just looks like a texture, but you can see in some places, here you have the embroidery combined with this kind of explosion. For him also, like we said about Asim with the plane, the combination of beauty and fear are something that repeat quite often. The airplane, again, something that's both magical, but also the jets and can be very scary, repeating. So here you can see where the needles, the holes, actually take on these patterns. And he says that he gets the patterns from the patterns that are in paper towels. if you notice the pattern in paper towel, so he'll place the paper towel over the paper, and then he'll put the pin pricks into it. And paper towels, he says, are something that's very symbolic to him, as something that absorbs everything, both also for him relates to his mother and to women, and to like his mother in the kitchen, and kind of soaking everything in, taking everything in, holding everything inside. But also in the country, something that cleans everything up, covers over things that are happening. So that paper towel, the theme that repeats. Another theme that repeats for him is letters and stamps. He has this collection of collages, which he calls the Dead Letter Office. So I don't know if you knew, but apparently there are, I looked it up to check today. There are dead letter offices, several of them in the US and Europe, where dead mail is collected, mail that doesn't have any place to go to, or any place that we don't know where it comes from. And this concept was so interesting to Farid, because he kind of felt like this idea of being stuck in between places was something that he could relate to. And apparently in these dead letter offices, they actually take out valuables and have auctions every so often. And so he was very fascinated by this idea, and then also incorporated stamps that are national stamps in Israel that relate to both nature, but also historical events. So we have here Choma u'Migdal, the wall and the tower, before the establishment of the state of Israel, the way that settlements were established, being a national stamp, but not a part of his specific narrative. So he's asking himself again, where do I fit in? And his work can clearly be seen as perhaps the most political of the artists, though he himself doesn't see it in that way. He himself will say, it's personal. It's my story. I'm not trying to make a political statement. I'm trying to understand my own reality. So he also has a series of paintings of no signal. Again, this idea of kind of being stuck in between places. And the cat is also a motif that repeats. So if we had maybe the bird with Karim, and we had the hyena with Said, so the cat is very central for Farid. A cat, again, also, especially in Israel, not as much in America, but in Israel, as being the animal that it's cute, but you don't really want it in your house. It kind of like want it to stay on the sidelines. So I think he also is relating to this animal that kind of is in between. It's wandering. He has a series of cat paintings, and here the cats combined with this technique of tiny, tiny, tiny holes, again made by that reference to the paper towel motif. It also has pieces that relate to childhood and what is the place of children kind of in this Middle East context. So this is a toy. It's made of dirt, but obviously it's also a military vessel. And what role does this reality that we're living in Israel play for children? Question. Again, here's a reference to the tsabar, the cactus, the harshness, but it's also a bear. It's also a child's toy. So he's asking these questions about where we fit in and how we relate to what's happening around us at different stages of development. So that is Farid. And I think, before I stop for questions, it's okay with everyone there. I want to just share with you a little bit of what this exhibition is allowing us to do and the impact that it's having, because it's really, really exciting. The museum has always welcomed children and has always been a place for learning for the community, really a heart of the community. From very young ages, children are crawling in. Today in the museum, there were about 150 preschool children, half of them Jewish, half of them Arab, came together to draw, they saw a play that was in both languages, laughing together. It's really something amazing. So we have, I just saw today the number of, since June, 2,000 children in the museum. since the beginning of June. So a lot of groups of kids experiencing art in our bodies, having a time to quietly reflect on pieces without the busyness and the, for a moment, a space to just kind of connect and reflect, and allowing that connection to be for anyone relating to it with their own stories in their own ways, making it personal, connecting to traditions, cultures, and of course, in different ways for very different ages, trying to make it really active and interactive. Sometimes getting a behind the scenes peek. We have a restoration studio where we work on with a professional restorer who restores old paintings. We're getting a behind the scenes, and really the idea that if you have to experience art with all your senses, with your whole body. You have to dance, you have to do yoga in order for it to really be an experience that you can relate to. And we want it to be relevant to their lives. To look at the story, say, how is this past connect to me today? So here we have in the Abu Shakar exhibition where we'll do this sometimes with Arab and Jewish students together if they're a little older and can communicate, where one will be blindfolded and one will explain the artwork to the other, and they'll have to try to imagine what they see without actually seeing, and it's also a trust exercise. Here we have a group of recent Ethiopian immigrants who were exploring and dressing up like pictures in the museum and used it as a kind of jumping board to speak about their own experiences coming to Israel. What I want to show you here is some specifically, of course, art making, also important way to relate to the artwork. But specifically the connections that are forming with this exhibition as a platform between Arab and Jewish students, because it's really remarkable and fairly unusual to have both art of Jewish artists and art of Arab artists in the museum. And so everyone can come in and feel like, okay, there's a part of my story here. I belong. And that's so important. And so we've now about completed, I think we have the last one next week, 6 different sessions for 6 pairs of schools, Arab and Jewish, who come together. They're 5th graders, so they don't speak the same language, and they'll create art together. Everything has to be done basically without speaking. So it's with your body. This actually on the left here is 2 Jewish groups, but Chabad and secular who came to meet together. Also, obviously, lots of tensions that had come up between different groups, but this exhibit also gave us an opportunity to bring people together from those different parts of the population. So drawing together, we had here you can see kids on one side, Arab child, on one side, a Jewish child, and they're doing mirroring and symmetrical drawing together, or pantomime, and all different kinds of activities that can be done just with expressions in your eyes, but without really speaking. Here, this was on one of our last meetings, and you can see how the relationship develops from a lot of tension at the beginning to slowly breaking that down. They were posing like one of Walid's trees as Arab and Jewish students, and you could feel here how they were starting to come together. This is from just the other day, the preschool children who are Arab and Jewish and all from the region, and everyone created one image of something that they love from this area. And the artwork was called Emek Yafeh Emek Sheli, this beautiful valley, my valley, because it's all of our valleys. So in that way, kind of starting to educate for art can be a way of creating change, and especially as they get older, educating them to be kind of artivists. So I'll stop here. Just since we have this picture, I'll just share that what we've gone through together, this virtual tour, we actually created in the beginning in Corona times, and then to be able to create programs for groups, especially school groups and and like Jewish education groups abroad to teach about Israel and about art through the museum. So we had some groups, actually, we worked with the Merit School in St. Louis and Epstein Hebrew Academy in St. Louis, in addition to groups in different places. So that's been really exciting as well. So there's a lot going on, but that gives you a little bit of a taste. So I'll stop here, and if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to try and answer.
Thank you, Tanya. It was absolutely stunning. I know we have some, remarks in the chat room. Can you see them?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Great. Has anyone ever been to the Mishkan Museum? No, so you're welcome to come in person. Let me know if you make it to Israel. Be happy to give you an in-person tour.
I thought the architecture, the story you told about the architecture was amazing. I just had no idea that the building had been there for so long. I thought it was a new construct, and I mean,
it's amazing that many people, even many people in Israel, aren't familiar with the museum. Even though it's getting more and more known lately, but yeah, many people don't know it.
It's really beautiful. So I do have a question. Is this the first time that this family has come together, or have they had other collaborations in the past?
There have been other exhibitions of the family in the past, certainly. Though I don't think of all 5 artists together. That I think is the first. Yeah.
It looks like Sandy has a question, by the way.
Yeah, is the museum on any organized trips to Israel? Oh, that's a good question. There are many different tour groups that do come to visit the museum, but I don't know of a specific organized trip offhand. That I don't know about, but it's on kind of the radar of different tour agencies.
It's good. It ought to be.
Yeah. Thanks.
And to answer Carol's question, yes, we have recorded this program. I'll send out a link to everyone so they can share it and view it at a later time if they like.
Oh, thank you. That's great.
Tanya, it's just remarkable. And I think what's really so striking, in addition to the art itself, is the spirit behind it of bringing people together. I mean, it's not just like you talked about beauty and fear, but different parts of the world, different ideas, different cultures, and finding common ground. And art is that platform where everybody can come together.
Right. Yeah, absolutely, Laura. Yeah.
It means a lot in today's world.
It really does. It really, yeah, it really does. Yeah, it gives so so much hope. Yeah, when you hear about everything happening, and even in our region, there have been situations that have happened even over the past months that have caused a lot of tension. There were times when schools said, we're not sure we want to come together anymore. But then you see the kids just now having the final meetings of the kids, and they're making these cactus sculptures where everyone has one cactus kind of leaf out of wood and paints one side and then gives it to someone else from a different school or culture to do the other side, and they put them together. And you just see the excitement when they create something together and they get to keep it and take it with them, and you see the connection. It's something that I hope will stay with them.
It looks like you also have a question. It says, can you talk more about the Arab art scene and the museum's connection to it?
Okay, thanks. I'll just tell you what I know, which unfortunately isn't so much. The museum really historically over the last, our current curator, Yaniv Shapira, and then the last curator, chief curator, Galia Bar-Or, who also curated this exhibition, were very interested in telling the stories, not only of kibbutz artists, but of minority groups that are not really represented in the mainstream of Israeli art history. So they have had a number of exhibitions of, there have been Bedouin artists, Druze artists, Arab, Israeli artists in the museum, also new immigrant artists and exhibition of foreign workers. So that's definitely something the museum is particularly interested in showing. And there are collaborations also that are happening. So that's something that is important in the museum and also in the museum's collection. There also are artists who are not Jewish or Arab artists, but specifically more about what's happening in the Arab art scene in Israel. I wish I could share more, but I don't know.
There's also a question about fear of attack. The question is there any fear of attacks on the museum itself?
Thank you. That's a good question. Not unheard of, I would say, over the last, unfortunately. I mean, I don't think any real actual fear of attack. You're saying because of the collaboration that maybe that's happening, if there are people that are opposed to it. But it has, things have come up in the past where there have been artists, not specifically right now in this exhibition, there are people who maybe aren't interested in coming, but I haven't heard anything about attacks in relation to this exhibition. There was an exhibition 3 years ago where there was an artist who very unintentionally, but had a piece that kind of offended some religious sensibilities. And then there was, in response, some threats and potential protests, and it, I think, ended in a very respectful way of opening up dialogue between different streams of how do we deal with these kinds of issues, because of course a museum wants to be able to be a place that you can openly express ideas, but then also realizing that our audience comes from many different backgrounds, religious backgrounds of different types, and there might be things that can be difficult or offensive and to different populations. So it's a tricky balance line to walk. So there's been some kind of that has come up before.
Well, it's an amazing place for you to work, and thank you for sharing it with us. We just really can't express our appreciation for taking the time to share the art and stories and the spirit of the museum. It's very unique.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's really, really great to be with you all. I really enjoyed it. So thanks.
Well,
thanks for you.
We're sending lots of love from St. Louis to you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any other questions before we sign off? Okay, well, thank you again. And I hope we can do this again someday.
My pleasure. That'd be great.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye.